Jang labdha chaparang labham mannate nadikam tata.
Consciousness, such a loose word to describe something that's so tremendously vast. And human consciousness in and of itself, what we know of it today, is only perhaps a fraction of the reality of what human consciousness can be.
But this wholeness, this new consciousness, this wholeness, is that something that you can only glimpse? Perhaps in, like, as you might have a glimpse of heaven, or is it something scientific? I mean, can you think your way through it?
Not really complete. The wholeness is an attitude or an approach, but it can be given a scientific realization. You see, we can, if we wish, look on the world as a whole.
And if we get to wholeness, are we then in heaven? I mean, where else is there to go?
We'll never get. It's not a place you can get. The wholeness, I say, is a kind of attitude or an approach to the whole of life. It's a way, if we can have a coherent approach to reality, then reality will respond coherently to us.
And if we have coherence, in what way will our behavior be seen to be different?
Well, we will produce the results we intend rather than the results we don't intend.
Yes.
That's the first big change. Then we will be more orderly, harmonious, we will be happier. I think we could put all that in there. But the major source of unhappiness is that we are incoherent and therefore producing results that we don't really want. And then trying to overcome them while we keep on producing them. The question is, what is the real origin of consciousness? What is the real origin of consciousness?
Every night, it dissolves your body in the subconscious sphere and makes you realize that you are not a man, nor a woman, but a piece of consciousness, a reflection of his consciousness sleeping in space, in joy. The drama of sleep gave me the greatest faith in joy. You are made in his image. You cannot be violated or hurt by stones, nor bombs, nor machine guns, nor atomic bombs. Remember, the best shelter is in the silence of your soul. And if you can develop that silence, nothing in the world can touch you. As I often say, we are all gods at night, but we become devils during the day. And if we can be gods during the day, we are gods all the time. So remember, on one little piece of thought is the whole universe resting, and when the rub of the thought at night, the whole universe tumbles away. You do not realize that the ocean is present in every drop, and that great power of God is present in every thought.
Grand Existence, Citizens of the Universe. I'm JD, Nicholas Jensen Denton. Today I'd like to talk to you about medicine, plant medicine, tree medicine, oil medicine. Where does it come from? Why does it come from that? What is it doing to ourselves as an individual and as a society? And how we can go about healing in the future, in the present, from here on out. So let me minimize myself. Whoa, I'm shrinking. All right, I'm going to put myself here in the corner. I might go a little bit smaller even, and let's do it. So the truth about aspirin, exposing Big Pharma and combating their tyranny. So we'll get to the tyranny in a second, but the truth about aspirin is pretty interesting, needless to say. It enlightened me. I hope it enlightens you. It enlightened me to the nature of big pharma, how and how medicine is made in the modern era, how it used to be made, and why it's made that way. To who, what, where, why, and how of aspirin. All right, so you can see here we got a little timeline. 1934 BC, that's before Christ, the first record of willow bark as an analgesic. Now, that's where it comes from. Willow bark, white willow, the tree here, which you see in the bottom left, the bark of this tree contains some unique compounds which basically are modern day cure-alls. And this first little inch of time is like almost 1,000 years. It goes from 1934 BC to 1700 AD. And then you can see how we've been gaining knowledge over this particular plant medicine for quite some time. When Edward Stone used it to treat his fever for the first recorded time. I'm sure they did it long before that, but the first recorded well, I don't know if it's the first. I hate saying like this is the first and this is the last, because God's got other plans with the first and the last. So really what we're looking at is just a culturally accepted timeline. And you can see that aspirin here, 1938, it was linked to gastritis. It was starting to be used in paracetamol in 1956, dipyridamole in the 1960s. And they keep it there. Multiple ibuprofen also in the 60s. We got a lot of different drugs that we can develop. Now, when I say drugs, I mean a pharmaceutical drug that is made and synthesized in a lab for a very specific condition, illness, ailment. There are multiple different applications of this one drug within the human physiology, and we haven't always known them. It wasn't like somebody just took some of this bark out, made it into a tea, and they're like, dang, this is great for all these things. It started more out as a simple pain reliever, and we didn't know how it worked for a very long time. And as we learn more about how it worked, we begin to be able to apply it in different ways. Now, the reason there's a picture of a fracking or a cracking facility down here on the bottom right where they process crude oil, well, we'll get into that in a minute. But frankly, I just wanted to point out that white willow has been used as a natural plant medicine for thousands, at least 3,000 documented years. And we've known about its, healing, adverse side effects and healing side effects. Look, I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but anything that is medicinal is also toxic, depending on the concentration. We all know this thanks to the father of pharmacology, our beloved Paracelsus, who is potentially a saint. At any rate, let's get further into this. What are the original origins? I already told you. It comes from a tree. Okay? It comes from a tree. The white willow tree, there's purple willow. I think there's a red willow too, with all different variations and concentrations of salicylic acid within it. So it came out of the tree, and then the active constituent, the active constituent you can see here is a natural compound known as salicylic acid. This right here, this OH is this OH right here is the acidic portion. And that's what makes it an acid. So this is all a salicylic naturally produced compound in the bark of the tree. In the bark of this tree. Except the thing is, with medicine in our Western culture, is that because of the Rockefellers, I'm sure most people are familiar with the Rockefellers, John D. Rockefeller, the oil mogul, and the Rockefeller Foundation, which had a massive impact on the medicine industry. I mean, they had a massive impact across multiple different fields of life, but it really started out with the monopolization on the oil industry, which the Rockefellers, through financial incentivization, they were able to discover that essentially oil, meaning petroleum, crude oil, is like almost like the hypostasis of all biological matter. And through manipulating oil, we can produce many, many, many different products. I'm talking about oil. Obviously, oil comes from crude oil. We get oil, we get plastics, right? There's a lot of talk about plastic right now because of the polyvinyl chloride, otherwise known as PVC, which exploded in East Palestine, Ohio. What was all that plastic doing? It was likely a petroleum-based product being sent to some other facility for further synthesis of materials. And what this means, or why this is because in the early 1900s, the Rockefeller Foundation realized the potential engineering capacity or potential engineerability of hydrocarbons into individual drugs. And what he did was the Rockefeller Foundation re-educated. These guys were the precursors to the World Health Organization. So they called it the International Health Division. And in creating this International Health Division, the Rockefeller Foundation, which you can read about all on this slide right here, they move that over. They created the American Medical Association. They revamped the entire educational division, because what was happening in the early 1900s is that practitioners, doctors were regularly prescribing and researching natural medicines. But the problem is that you cannot patent a natural compound. Compounds that are found in nature cannot be patented and thus cannot be profitable by corporations, which are people, according to the law, not according to me. But the thing is that these corporations, these entities, these foundations, they require financial sustainment. And that is like first over everything. That is the driving, motivating factor of the Industrial Revolution, as Noam Chomsky called the pioneers of this time as the, quote, masters of the universe, whose prime maxim was to gain wealth and forgetting all but self. So forget everything else, fuck everything else, let's gain money and only worry about ourselves. Now, if this was like a big S in the Supreme Self, that wouldn't be a bad thing, because that would mean literally all and other. But actually, they're talking about the egotistical, biological, identity-bound, corporeal self. Gain wealth, forgetting everything except your immediate self. That's kind of a satanic sentiment, or a Luciferian sentiment, if you ask me. And so what the Rockefellers did was, in the beginning of the 1900s, they separated naturopathic medicine, and instituted allopathic medicines, meaning we went from using plant-based medicines, which are derived from whole plant materials, and we transferred into the practice of allopathic medicine, which uses individual drug-based modality in order to treat illness and create medicines. And so there's this massive schism I think, in chemistry and in science for sure about holistic based medicine or naturopathic medicine versus allopathic. Can we really treat diseases with single drug based products? I'll leave that up to you to decide as we go through this, or for you to decide what you think would be best for you. But basically, they discovered that this oil, this crude oil, which is arguably the blood of the earth, can be formed and fashioned into basically anything. Oil is the foundational building block. It is carbon, hydrogen chains of carbohydrates, okay? Hydrocarbons, I think, is the general catch-all term that people are using when they don't know exactly what they're talking about and they just want to describe everything and sound smart. But the truth is that long chains of carbons bound to carbons with hydrogens coming off of them is what oil is. And I should have got a picture of some oil-based compounds up here. So look, here's an oil-based compound. This is a carbon. This is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is a hexane compound. And through breaking, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but through manipulating the length of the chain and the geometry of the chain and the bonding patterns of the chain of carbons, then you can have great power over the type of product that this type of physical chemistry produces. And so the Rockefellers realized this, and they decided, fuck what we've been doing, that's unprofitable, let's make this profitable and create a petroleum-based reality, basically, but really petroleum-based medicine, petroleum-based transportation, and like I said, plastic comes from petroleum. And so look around, we live in a world that's running on oil. And this is important because instead of now producing aspirin, or the active ingredient of aspirin, which is salicylic acid here on the left, this slide is just about how the Rockefeller Foundation kind of took over the medical industry. You can read that on your own time. What was I going to say? But petroleum-based medicine, they realized that they didn't need to get it from trees, okay? They realized that we can just, like I said, form and fashion these molecules out of the crude hypostatic material, which is oil itself. And so how is that done? First of all, you got to get the petroleum oil out of the ground. And this is done through fracking. People don't understand. People don't know about fracking, but I'm sure a lot of people do. But it's basically a terrible, I don't know, it's a resource wasting process. Like, we are wasting insane amounts of water and pushing it into the earth along with sand, other chemicals, which go into the shale of earth, this hard rock where there are natural gas and petroleum deposits, oil-based deposits, which are stuck in the rock basically, and through intense pressure we're able to crack the shale rock, this hard bedrock of our earth, of this being we're living on. We're cracking it open, allowing the oil to flow out of the ground into our, trucks, into our containers, into our crude oil suppliers, so that it can be further worked on. And I bring this fracking process up because it's hydraulic fracturing it's potentially very dangerous to the water supply in anywhere that this is happening, especially in the Northeast. We can see a lot of issues starting to come up. People are turning on their sinks and they're lighting their water on fire. There's all sorts of contaminants across many different resources, from the crops to the water to the food supply, that is being affected through this fracking process. Not to mention, we might be literally living on an intelligent being which can feel all of this and will eventually make us stop this. And this is, like I say, the prime substance, the prime resource of our world, okay? All wars are fought, if they're not over occult, like, belief patterns of religion and whatnot, it's over oil. And this is very symbolic because, like I said, oil is the blood of the earth, and oil is what we run on. And as we know, Christ is anointed with the oil. So there's a lot of metaphor and allegory which we can go into unpacking here in terms of as within, so without, and what really, how we get mixed up on different fuel sources. Because God is the only real fuel source. God is unlimited, unhindered, free energy. But for some, and that happens within us, but for some reason, the Rockefeller Foundation decided to go and subvert our energy resource and externalize it. And so what happens after you frack, you get the oil out, and then you got to subject it to this kind of process down here. Cracking, they call it. Cracking is what I was describing, is taking these long carbon chains and breaking them down into shorter, or like whatever designer carbon chain you need. It's done by heating these things up to the point where that you can break this bond right here and then add hydrogens, or don't add hydrogens, so that you can make these double bonds. You can make triple bonded carbon chains, which all have unique properties. And this is important because this is literally where our drugs, sorry, not our drug, I don't want to say our drugs, but this is where our medicine comes from nowadays. We don't have to go to the tree. I mean, have to is a strong sentiment, but we don't have to go to the tree